The jungle canopy explodes in a wall of green fire. French soldiers scramble for cover as Viet Minh guerrillas melt back into the vegetation, and there, grinding forward through the mud and chaos, is a machine that should have been in a museum decades ago, a relic from another war, a steel dinosaur sent to fight in the wrong century. If you're fascinated by military history and the strange decisions that shaped the 20th century, subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. This is the story of why France, desperate and broke, sent obsolete weapons to fight an unwinnable war. The year is 1947. Europe lies in ruins. France, once a proud colonial power, has been humiliated. 4 years of German occupation have shattered the nation's economy, its industry, its pride. The French Third Republic collapsed in just 6 weeks in 1940. The shame of Vichy collaboration hangs over the nation like a toxic cloud. And now, with the war finally over, France faces a choice: accept diminished status as a second-rate power, or claw back its empire, piece by piece, bullet by bullet. Indochina represents everything France lost: Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. Rich in rubber, rice, and resources, a jewel of the colonial crown that Japanese occupation had temporarily stolen, but something has changed while France was distracted by its own survival. The Vietnamese have tasted independence. Ho Chi Minh declared Vietnamese independence in September 1945, quoting the American Declaration of Independence in his speech. The Viet Minh, battle-hardened from fighting the Japanese, have no intention of returning to colonial rule. General Philippe Leclerc arrives in Saigon in October 1945 with a simple mission: restore French authority. But he quickly realizes the scope of the problem. The Viet Minh control vast swaths of the countryside. French forces are stretched impossibly thin, and the equipment available to fight this war is a collection of hand-me-downs, cast-offs, and antiques that would make a museum curator weep. The French military in 1947 is a patchwork force. The Liberation Army that helped drive the Germans from France was equipped largely with American and British weapons. Tanks, trucks, aircraft, all of it borrowed, lent, or given. But those modern machines are needed in Europe to guard against the looming Soviet threat. What can France spare for a colonial war 10,000 kilometers away? The answer is whatever nobody else wants. Picture the Renault FT. This little tank first rolled off the production line in 1917, 3 decades earlier. It was revolutionary for its time. The first tank with a fully rotating turret. The first tank produced in truly massive numbers. Over 3,000 were built during the Great War. By 1947, it is a mechanical fossil. Its maximum speed is 7 kilometers per hour. A fit soldier can outrun it. Its armor can be penetrated by a heavy machine gun. Its 37-millimeter gun is adequate against unarmored targets, but useless against anything with real protection. And yet, here it is, being loaded onto transport ships bound for Saigon. The French High Command is not stupid. They know these machines are obsolete, but they face an impossible calculation. The war in Indochina is hemorrhaging men and money. The French public is weary of war. The economy cannot support the production of modern weapons in sufficient quantities. American military aid is not yet flowing. The Cold War has not yet fully crystallized into the global confrontation that will eventually drag America into Southeast Asia. In 1947, Washington is still uncertain about supporting European colonialism, so France makes do with what it has. The Renault FTs are shipped to Indochina alongside other relics, half-tracks from the African campaigns, Stuart light tanks that American forces had already deemed inadequate for fighting the Germans, Sherman tanks that had seen better days on the beaches of Normandy, aircraft that belonged in aviation museums. The French Expeditionary Force in Indochina becomes a graveyard for obsolete equipment. But here is the cruel irony. Against the Viet Minh in 1947, even these dinosaurs have teeth. Ho Chi Minh's forces possess almost no armor of their own, no anti-tank weapons to speak of. Their strength lies in numbers, in mobility, in their intimate knowledge of the terrain. A 30-year-old Renault FT grinding down a jungle road is still a terrifying sight to infantry armed with rifles and grenades. The psychological impact of armor, any armor, should not be underestimated. The French strategy in these early years relies heavily on fortified positions, the groups mobiles, mobile groups that can respond to Viet Minh attacks and project power into contested territory. The obsolete tanks provide fire support for these operations. They guard convoys on the vulnerable roads that snake through the Vietnamese highlands. They intimidate villages suspected of harboring guerrillas. For tasks like these, cutting-edge technology is not strictly necessary. Lieutenant Jean-Pierre Bonnard commands a platoon of Renault FTs near the Chinese border in late 1947. His tanks are older than he is. The engines overheat in the tropical humidity. Spare parts are impossible to find. His crews spend more time repairing their machines than fighting. But when the Viet Minh attack his convoy, the little tanks prove their worth. Their machine guns tear into the ambush positions. Their presence allows the infantry to regroup and counterattack. The column survives. Bonnard survives. The dinosaurs earn their keep that day. But the limitations quickly become apparent. The Viet Minh are learning. They avoid direct confrontation with French armor. They attack at night when the tanks are blind. They mine the roads, turning the French advantage into a liability. A Renault FT stuck in a bomb crater is not a weapon. It is a coffin. The narrow tracks sink into the mud during monsoon season. The underpowered engines cannot climb the steep mountain roads. The jungle itself becomes the enemy's greatest ally. The human cost is staggering. French tank crews in Indochina suffer terribly. The interiors of these old machines become ovens in the tropical heat. Temperatures inside can exceed 50 degrees Celsius. Crews collapse from heat exhaustion. The ventilation systems designed for European weather are completely inadequate. Tropical diseases sweep through the ranks: malaria, dysentery, dengue fever. The medical facilities are overwhelmed. Men die not from enemy action, but from the simple act of serving inside obsolete equipment in an unsuitable climate. And still, the Renault FTs soldier on, through 1948, through 1949. Year after year, these antiques are patched together, sent back into the jungle, destroyed, and replaced with more antiques. The French inventory in Indochina reads like an archaeological catalog. M3 Stuart tanks, M4 Sherman tanks, M8 Greyhound armored cars, M24 Chaffee light tanks, each generation slightly less obsolete than the last, but none truly modern. None designed for jungle warfare, none adequate for the war. France is actually fighting. Take a moment to like and share this video if you're finding this history fascinating. Your support helps bring these forgotten stories to light. The strategic situation in Indochina deteriorates steadily through the late 1940s. The Viet Minh grow stronger. Chinese Communist victory in 1949 provides Ho Chi Minh with a powerful ally on his northern border. Weapons, training, and sanctuary flow across the frontier. The guerrilla war transforms into something more conventional, more dangerous, and France's dinosaurs find themselves facing opponents who can finally fight back on equal terms. The Chinese begin supplying the Viet Minh with recoilless rifles, bazookas captured from American forces in Korea, anti-tank mines smuggled across the border. Suddenly, those Renault FTs and Stuarts are not merely obsolete. They are death traps. The armor that once provided psychological protection now provides only psychological comfort. The crews know their machines cannot survive a hit from a bazooka. They know the roads are mined. They know that every mission could be their last. French commanders in Indochina plead for modern equipment. They send reports detailing the inadequacy of their armored forces. They request M47 Patton tanks. They request modern self-propelled artillery. They request helicopters for medical evacuation and troop transport. Paris listens, sympathizes, and explains that the budget simply does not allow for such expenditures. The Fourth Republic is struggling to rebuild France itself. Colonial wars are a luxury the nation cannot truly afford. The American position begins to shift after 1949. The fall of China to communism terrifies Washington. The domino theory takes shape. If Indochina falls, Thailand falls. If Thailand falls, Malaya falls. If Malaya falls, Indonesia falls. Suddenly, France's colonial war becomes America's problem. Military aid begins to flow. By 1950, the United States is underwriting a significant portion of France's war effort in Indochina, but even American aid cannot instantly modernize the French forces. The logistics of shipping modern equipment halfway around the world are formidable. The infrastructure in Indochina cannot support heavy tanks. The roads are too narrow, the bridges are too weak, the terrain is too rough. And so the dinosaurs continue to serve, even as more capable machines arrive in dribs and drabs. The M24 Chaffee light tank represents a significant improvement over the Renault FTs it replaces. Designed in 1943, it is faster, better armed, and better protected. Its 75mm gun can engage most targets the Viet Minh can field. Its relatively light weight allows it to navigate the fragile Vietnamese infrastructure. By 1951, the Chaffee has become the backbone of French armored forces in Indochina. But even the Chaffee is showing its age, designed for reconnaissance and exploitation, not for the grinding attritional warfare of a counterinsurgency campaign. The Battle of Route Coloniale 4 in October 1950 demonstrates the limitations of French armor in Indochina. A convoy of French forces, including armor, attempts to evacuate the garrison at Cao Bang, near the Chinese border. The Viet Minh, now organized into conventional divisions equipped with Chinese weapons, spring a devastating ambush. The French column is strung out along kilometers of mountainous road. The tanks cannot maneuver off the road surface. They cannot support each other. They are picked off one by one. The entire garrison is annihilated. Over 6,000 French soldiers are eliminated or captured. It is the worst French colonial defeat since Montcalm fell at Quebec. The dinosaurs that survive Route Coloniale 4 are shell-shocked relics. Their crews have witnessed the future. The Viet Minh are no longer a ragtag guerrilla force to be dispersed with a show of armored force. They are a modern army, capable of destroying French units in conventional battle. The equation has changed fundamentally. The question is no longer whether France can pacify Indochina with obsolete equipment. The question is whether France can survive in Indochina at all. General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny arrives in Indochina in December 1950 with a mandate to reverse the deteriorating situation. He is France's greatest living soldier, the liberator of Provence, the man who led French forces into Germany in 1945. He immediately recognizes the fundamental problem. France is fighting a 20th century war with 19th century thinking and early 20th century equipment. De Lattre demands reinforcements. He demands modern weapons. He demands American support on a massive scale, and he begins receiving it. The M24 Chafees are supplemented with additional armor. Artillery is upgraded. Air support is expanded. The French military in Indochina finally begins to resemble a modern fighting force. But de Lattre also understands that technology alone cannot win this war. He creates the Vietnamese National Army, attempting to shift the burden of fighting to indigenous forces. He builds a network of fortifications, the de Lattre Line, to protect the vital Red River Delta. The dinosaurs, meanwhile, are finally retired. The last Renault FTs are withdrawn from frontline service. Some are converted to static pillboxes, their turrets mounted on concrete bunkers. Others are simply abandoned, left to rust in depot yards. A few are shipped back to France for museum display. Their war is over, but the war itself continues. Delatre's reforms buy time, but they cannot alter the fundamental dynamics of the conflict. The general himself falls ill with cancer in 1951. He returns to France and dies in January 1952. His successors inherit an improved but still inadequate force structure. The Viet Minh continue to grow stronger. Chinese aid continues to flow. The French public continues to lose patience with the guerre sale, the dirty war that consumes their sons and their treasury. The final act unfolds at Dien Bien Phu in 1954. General Henri Navarre, the latest French commander, attempts to draw the Viet Minh into a conventional battle where French firepower can be decisive. He establishes a massive fortified camp in a remote valley near the Laotian border. He believes the Viet Minh cannot bring heavy weapons through the mountainous jungle. He is catastrophically wrong. General Vo Nguyen Giap, the Viet Minh commander, performs the impossible. His forces disassemble artillery pieces and carry them through the mountains on human backs. They dig tunnels and trenches toward the French positions. They position their guns on the reverse slopes of the hills surrounding the valley, invisible to French counter-battery fire. When the battle begins in March 1954, the French are stunned by the volume and accuracy of Viet Minh artillery. The tanks at Dien Bien Phu are M24 Chaffees, 10 of them. They are among the most modern French equipment in Indochina, and they are completely inadequate for the battle that unfolds. The valley floor turns to mud under the monsoon rains. The tanks cannot maneuver, they cannot support the outlying strong points that fall one by one to human wave attacks. They become targets for the Viet Minh artillery, burning hulks that illuminate the French defeat. Dien Bien Phu falls on May 7, 1954. Over 11,000 French soldiers are captured. The defeat is total and humiliating. The Geneva Accords that follow partition Vietnam at the 17th parallel. France's century of colonial rule in Indochina is over. The dinosaurs have failed. But the story does not end there. The equipment that France shipped to Indochina, the tanks and trucks and aircraft, does not simply vanish. Some of it falls into Viet Minh hands. Some is transferred to the newly created Republic of Vietnam in the south. Some is shipped to other French colonial conflicts in Algeria and elsewhere. The dinosaurs continue their journey through the conflicts of the 20th century. And what of the men who crewed those obsolete machines? The French tank crews who fought and died in vehicles their grandfathers might have recognized. Their sacrifice is largely forgotten, overshadowed by the larger tragedy of Dien Bien Phu, overshadowed by the American War that follows. They served in machines that should never have been sent to that conflict. They did their duty with equipment that was inadequate from the start. They deserve to be remembered. The decision to send World War I and World War II relics to fight in Indochina was not made out of malice or stupidity. It was made out of desperation. France in 1947 was a wounded nation, struggling to maintain its status as a great power with resources that simply did not match its ambitions. The colonial empire was seen as essential to French recovery, to French pride, to French identity. And so France fought for it with whatever weapons were available. The lesson of the dinosaurs is a lesson about the limits of military technology. Obsolete equipment can be effective against a weaker opponent. The Renault FTs terrorized Vietnamese villages in 1947. But as the enemy grows stronger, as the conflict escalates, the limitations become fatal. The Viet Minh evolved faster than French equipment could be upgraded. By the time American aid began modernizing French forces, the strategic situation had deteriorated beyond recovery. Subscribe if you want to continue exploring forgotten corners of military history. the stories of men and machines that shaped our world. There is another lesson here about the arrogance of colonial powers. France believed that technological superiority, even obsolete technological superiority, would be sufficient to suppress indigenous resistance. The Vietnamese were dismissed as backward peasants who could not possibly stand against European military might. This contempt was not unique to France. The British felt it in Malaya. The Dutch felt it in Indonesia. The Americans would feel it in Vietnam a decade later. And in each case, it proved catastrophically mistaken. The dinosaurs of Indochina serve as a metaphor for colonial warfare itself, sending outdated machines to fight an outdated war, clinging to an imperial model that the 20th century had already rendered obsolete. France learned this lesson at terrible cost. Over 90,000 French and Allied soldiers were eliminated in the First Indochina War. Hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese perished. The land was scarred by 8 years of continuous conflict. And in the end, nothing was gained. The empire that France fought to preserve dissolved anyway, piece by piece, over the following 2 decades. The last Renault FT was officially retired from French service in 1949. A handful of them served even longer in other armies, in Syria and Yugoslavia and China. Today, surviving examples are scattered across museums worldwide. Visitors peer at them through glass cases, marveling at how small they are, how primitive they look. They do not see the men who died inside them. They do not hear the grinding of the tracks through Vietnamese mud. They do not smell the cordite and the fear. History tends to remember the spectacular. The Tiger tanks of Kursk, the M1 Abrams of Desert Storm, the cutting-edge weapons that defined their conflicts. The dinosaurs are forgotten, the stopgap measures, the hand-me-downs, the machines sent to fight wars their designers never imagined. But these forgotten weapons carried real men into real battles. Their stories deserve to be told. The French Expeditionary Force that fought in Indochina from 1945 to 1954 included men from across the French Empire: Algerians, Moroccans, Senegalese, Vietnamese. The Foreign Legion provided some of the most experienced and capable units. These men served together in the hulls of obsolete tanks, in the cockpits of outdated aircraft, in the holds of rusting transport ships. They fought and died for a cause that history has judged harshly, but their courage was real, their sacrifice was real. Private First Class Ahmed Ben Hassan was an Algerian serving with the 2nd Armored Regiment in Tonkin in 1948. His unit operated M3 Stuart tanks, American-built machines that had been considered obsolete even during World War II. The Stuart's 37mm gun was adequate against soft targets, but its thin armor made it vulnerable to even light anti-tank weapons. Hassan and his crewmates knew this. They went into battle anyway. During an operation near the Chinese border in November 1948, Hassan's tank was struck by a recoilless rifle round. The projectile penetrated the hull and detonated inside the cramped fighting compartment. Hassan was seriously wounded, but survived. 2 of his crewmates did not. He was evacuated to a hospital in Hanoi, where French doctors saved his leg but could not erase the memories. He was returned to France in 1949, medically discharged and forgotten by history. His story, and thousands like it, disappeared into the archives. The French defeat in Indochina set the stage for American involvement. The Geneva Accords divided Vietnam but did not bring peace. The United States, increasingly committed to containing communism in Southeast Asia, propped up the Republic of Vietnam in the South. The same domino theory that had justified American support for France now justified direct American intervention. The dinosaurs gave way to helicopters and napalm and B-52 bombers. The First Indochina War became the Vietnam War. The cycle of violence continued for another 2 decades. Looking back at 1947, The decision to send obsolete equipment to Indochina seems almost inevitable. France had no modern tanks to spare. France had no money to buy new ones. France had no choice but to use what was available. The dinosaurs were a symptom of a deeper problem, a nation clinging to imperial ambitions it could no longer afford. A military fighting a war it could not win with weapons it could not replace. The parallels to later conflicts are striking. The Soviet Union in Afghanistan, the United States in Iraq and Afghanistan. Great powers confident in their technological superiority, discovering that insurgencies cannot be defeated by firepower alone. The lessons of Indochina were available. They were studied in war colleges around the world, and they were repeatedly ignored. The dinosaurs are gone now. The last Renault FTs rusted away decades ago. The Stuarts and Shermans and Chaffees that served in Indochina have been scrapped or preserved in museums. The men who crewed them are almost all gone too, claimed by time and mortality. But their story remains, a cautionary tale about the limits of power, a reminder that technology is not destiny, a memorial to the forgotten soldiers who fought in forgotten machines in a war that should never have been fought. This is the story of France's dinosaurs in Indochina. Obsolete weapons sent to fight an unwinnable war, men dying in machines older than their fathers, a colonial power learning too late that the age of empire was ending. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more forgotten military history. And remember the men who served in the dinosaurs. They deserve at least that much.